Southampton County, Virginia. August 21st, 1831, 2 in the morning. The night hangs heavy, suffocating. A single dog barks, cut short by silence. Somewhere metal rattles against wood. A door groans open. Bare feet pad across rough planks. A whisper now, then it comes, the scream. High, sharp, torn from a throat in terror. The air tastes of iron, thick with blood not yet spilled. Darkness swallows the house again. By dawn, dozens will lie dead. By dusk, an entire county will tremble, and one name will never fade: Nat Turner. The summer of 1831 pressed its weight onto Virginia like a curse. Cotton fields stretched endless, shimmering under a cruel sun. The earth was cracked, thirsty. In the swamps, cicadas screamed. Chains clinked with each movement in the fields. Overseers watched from horseback, eyes sharp as blades. Inside her parlor, Rebecca Vaughn adjusted the lace on her sleeve. Her hands shook, though she would not admit it. Rebecca Vaughn, plantation mistress, her pearls always cold against her neck. "Too quiet," she muttered. "Too quiet by half." Her maid looked up from polishing the silver. "Ma'am?" "The quarters. I don't hear singing. Not even a hymn." Rebecca's voice cracked. "They always sing." The maid swallowed, eyes darting. She said nothing. Outside, a raven perched on the fence post, black feathers glinting. Meanwhile, a mile away, Thomas Gray bent over his desk. Thomas Gray, lawyer, restless soul. His fingers forever ink-stained, the candle sputtered, throwing shadows across pages covered in hurried script. Gray muttered aloud as he wrote, words tumbling out faster than his pen could keep pace. Confession. Testimony. They'll want blood for blood. But the truth, yes, the truth must be preserved. His hand paused. He licked his lips, listening to the silence pressing against the walls. A knock at the door jolted him. "Who's there?" A young messenger boy shuffled inside, hat in his hands, sweat dripping down his temples. "Mr. Gray, sir. They say there's been killings. Out by the Travis place." Gray's pen froze. His eyes narrowed. "Killings?" The boy nodded, trembling. "Slaves, sir. They've risen up." The words hung in the candlelight like smoke. Rebecca Vaughn, across town, pulled her curtains tighter. "The air feels wrong tonight." Her husband scoffed, pipe smoke curling from his lips. "You let your imagination run, woman." They wouldn't dare. Not here. But outside the Vaughn house, in the trees just beyond the lantern's glow, shadows shifted. Breathless figures crouched low, waiting. The sound of steel being sharpened carried faintly in the night air. Rebecca clutched her pearls again. Thomas Gray dipped his quill once more and whispered to himself, almost in prayer. If this is true, then history has turned. The boy still lingered at the doorway, twisting his hat. "Sir, what do we do?" Gray stared into the candle's flame. "We listen." The raven outside beat its wings and took flight into the dark. The night deepened. Somewhere, chains rattled again. And in that silence, in that suffocating pause, the story of Nat Turner began to stir. The cabin was small, its walls patched with scraps of wood. Smoke from the hearth stung the eyes, but inside it was safer than the fields. Nancy Turner sat with her son at her knee. Her voice carried a rhythm older than Virginia. Older than chains, Nancy Turner, the mother, keeper of songs. Her lullabies heavy with sorrow. She sang low, words half English, half memory of Africa. "Sleep, little crow, wings to the sky. Sleep, little crow. Never let them chain you." Nat's eyes, wide and watchful, followed the flames. Nat Turner, the boy who saw visions, his gaze already far away. "Mama," he whispered, "I saw a light in the sky today." Nancy stiffened. "What kind of light, Nat?" It swallowed the sun. Everything went dark, like God was covering the world with his hand. Nancy drew him closer. "Don't speak too loud. They'll say you're cursed." Nat frowned. "But it was a sign, wasn't it?" She hushed him, pressing his face into her apron. "It was a warning. You must carry it quiet, Nat. Quiet as the chains outside." A shadow moved by the doorway. It was Hark Travis. Strong even as a boy, his laughter quick but his silence deeper. "Nat's dreaming again," Hark teased, stepping inside with a crooked grin. "Always talking about signs and stars." Nat looked up sharply. "It's not a dream, I saw it. I feel it here." He tapped his chest. Nancy shot Hark a warning look. Let him be. The world will test him soon enough. Hark shrugged, but there was no malice. He sat by the fire and stretched his hands toward the heat. Maybe your visions will set us free one day, Nat. The words hung like smoke. Nancy's eyes darted toward the window where an overseer's whip cracked faintly in the distance. Don't joke about freedom, she said, voice trembling. They hear such words, they'll cut your tongue out. Hark lowered his head. The crack of the whip echoed again, closer this time. Nat clenched his fists. One day I'll speak, even if they cut me down for it. Nancy's hand shook as she touched his face. You speak only to God for now. But in the boy's eyes burned something she could not silence. The certainty of destiny. That night, long after Nancy drifted into restless sleep, Nat sat awake. Staring at the crow feather he kept hidden under his straw bed. It was black, sharp, perfect. Hark stirred beside him. Nat, you're awake? I can't sleep, Nat whispered. I keep hearing the chains. Even when they're not moving. Hark rolled over, sighing, then dream of breaking them. Nat smiled faintly in the dark. I already do. The fire dimmed. Outside the fields lay silent. But inside the boy's chest, the first sparks of rebellion stirred. The woods were their refuge. By day, it was the overseer's land. By night, it was theirs. A circle of stones, the whisper of leaves, the faint hum of crickets. Here, secrets were born. Nat knelt in the dirt, tracing letters with a stick. The moon cast pale light over his hand. Beside him sat Cherry, her voice softer than the night air. Cherry Turner, his wife. Her lullabies carried hope sharper than knives. You'll ruin your fingers writing in the dirt, she teased, brushing soil from his hand. One day they'll find out. Nat glanced at her. Then let them. Words are a weapon sharper than any blade. Cherry shook her head, the firelight catching in her dark eyes. Blades they can see. Words cut where no one expects. From the shadows a low chuckle came. Isaac, broad-shouldered, his voice heavy with doubt, always choosing caution. Preacher, you think paper will save us? It won't stop their whips. Nat didn't look up. Paper carries truth. Truth carries God, and God carries us all. Isaac snorted. You sound like the good book they keep locked away. Nat's hand stilled. From his pocket he pulled a scrap of paper. Edges torn. Letters faint but legible. He held it up like treasure. Cherry's breath caught. Where did you... A boy slipped it to me. Said it was trash from the big house. Isaac leaned closer, suspicious. You risked your neck for that? Nat nodded. Every word I learn is a chain broken. Cherry touched his arm. Then teach me, Nat. If words are chains undone, I want to be free with you. Isaac pulled back, shaking his head. You'll get her whipped or worse. You think they won't notice two slaves whispering in the dark? Passing scraps of paper like stolen silver. Nat's eyes flashed. Better to risk for freedom than live forever bent. Cherry's hand lingered on his. I'll risk it. The fire snapped, sending sparks upward like stars trying to break free. A hush settled. In the silence, Nat began to read. Stumbling, slow, each word carved from the air. In the beginning. Cherry leaned in, her lips parting in awe. Isaac turned his face away, muttering. The beginning of the end, that's what this is. Weeks later, Nat and Cherry sat in the cabin, their voices low. She hummed a lullaby, her fingers braiding strands of cloth. Nat smiled. Sing it again. She shook her head.
Why, you'll laugh.
I don't laugh at you. Cherry looked at him, eyes wet with something more than love. Then don't let me be a widow before I'm a wife. Nat's smile faded. What do you mean? They talk, Nat, in the quarters. They say you'll lead men into fire one day. They say you're marked. Nat's jaw tightened. Marked by God. Marked for death. Her voice cracked. And if you go, what will become of me? He touched her cheek. Then you'll carry my name, my blood. My voice will live in our children. Her lullaby faltered. She pressed her face to his chest, whispering, I don't want your voice. I want you. The fire outside the cabin flared, sudden and sharp. For a moment, the whole room burned red. One evening, Isaac cornered Nat by the well, voice sharp. You're filling their heads with dreams. He'll get them killed. Nat's hands gripped the bucket rope. Dreams are all we have. Dreams don't stop bullets. Nat's gaze lifted steady. But they can make men walk into them without fear. Isaac's lip curled. You'd lead us all to slaughter for your visions. Is that your God's work? Nat's voice lowered, heavy. My God doesn't promise safety. He promises deliverance. For the first time, Isaac had no reply. He turned, muttering, Deliverance tastes like blood. Nat let the bucket fall, water splashing into the dust. He stared at the horizon, where the sun sank red as if the sky itself bled. Behind him, Cherry began to hum again, soft, steady. The sound of love clinging to a future she knew might never come. The woods, the scraps of paper, the lullabies, the warnings, they all pressed in heavy and inevitable. Nat's world was no longer that of a boy with visions. He was a man now, carrying secrets that burned hotter than fire, sharper than chains. And every night the silence in the fields grew louder. The year was 1828, and the sky itself seemed to tremble. Nat stood in the field when the sun dimmed. Shadows crawled unnaturally across the rows of cotton, and the overseers looked up in confusion. A sudden hush spread over the land. The sun vanished, swallowed whole. A solar eclipse. Nat's voice broke the silence, quiet but firm. The Lord has covered the world with his hand again. A murmur rippled through the workers. Hark froze mid-swing with his hoe. Cherry, standing near the well, clutched her chest. Even Isaac's eyes widened. Someone whispered, "A sign." Nat lifted his face to the darkened sky. The time is near. The whip cracked. Joseph Travis rode into the field, silver buttons on his coat glinting against the half-light. Joseph Travis, master, arrogant, his voice dripping with cruelty, silver buttons always polished brighter than his soul. He pulled his horse to a stop, glaring. "What's this?" No one answered. "Work stops because the moon's got tricks?" His voice rose mocking. "Or because the preacher boy thinks he's Moses?" Nat said nothing, his eyes still on the heavens. Travis dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the dirt. He walked straight to Nat, close enough to smell the sweat and dust on his skin. "You," Travis said. "On your knees." Nat didn't move. Travis's hand shot out, striking him hard across the face. The sound cracked louder than the whip. "On your knees, boy." Nat's lip bled. He lowered slowly, but his eyes never left the master's face. Travis leaned in, voice a sneer. "You think your God sent you a message? Here's mine. Your God won't save you, Nat. I own you." The words cut deeper than the blow. Hark's fists clenched at his sides, but he stayed still. Isaac turned his head, unwilling to watch. Cherry's voice trembled, carrying across the rows. "Leave him, master. He means no harm." Travis turned toward her, smirking. "Harm? This one's dangerous because he believes his own lies." He spat in the dirt at Nat's knees. "You'll preach when I say you preach. You'll speak when I let you speak. You're no prophet. You're property." Nat's hands dug into the earth. His fingernails broke soil mixing with blood. But his voice was steady. "The Lord sees." Travis laughed, loud and sharp. "Then let him watch while you sweat for me." He mounted his horse again, snapping the reins. As he rode off, the light slowly returned, the eclipse fading. But something had shifted. The workers whispered low. Moses, the old man by the tree, muttered with a trembling hand. Moses, the elder, eyes clouded with years, voice like gravel. The sign was clear. "But beware, boy. For every vision there is betrayal. Trust no tongue too quick to speak." Nat stood, blood streaked on his chin. He looked at Cherry, at Hark, at Isaac. His voice quiet but unshaken, carried to them all. "One day soon the whip will crack for the last time." A silence followed, heavy with dread. The sky brightened again, but the world felt darker than before. Night cloaked the cabins, and the air smelled of pine smoke and damp earth. Inside one, shadows gathered. Faces lit by a single tallow candle leaned close, every ear straining for Nat's words. "The day is chosen," Nat whispered. "The Lord has given me the vision. Blood will flow like the Red Sea, and the oppressor will be drowned in it." Around him, 6 men listened. Hark, loyal, strong as iron. He nodded once, his massive hands folded. "Say the word, Nat. I'll swing the axe till my arms break." Henry Porter, fiery, reckless, with laughter that covered rage. He grinned, leaning forward. "We'll make them fear the dark, same as we've feared it all our lives." Austin, cautious, his voice slow, always calculating. "Fear won't be enough. We'll need food, guns, and silence. One word in the wrong ear." His eyes darted nervously. Nat fixed him with a steady gaze. "The Lord will close their ears." Pharaoh, young, untested, eyes burning with hunger for glory. He clenched his fists. "They beat my mother till she could not walk. I'll not die a slave." The men nodded one by one, as if sealing a pact with silence. But outside, the world pressed close. Every creak of the floorboard, every howl of a hound in the distance felt like a spy at the door. One night, as they slipped from the meeting place, lantern light cut through the trees. A patrol. The men froze. Hark pulled Nat behind a stump. Quiet. Boots crunched over leaves. White men with muskets and dogs passed just yards away, laughing. Slave's been whispering too much, one said. Heard one's been preaching about uprising. If I find him, I'll cut his tongue out myself. The men held their breath. A twig snapped under Pharaoh's heel. The patrol stopped. Dogs sniffed. A heartbeat stretched into eternity. Then a rabbit darted from the brush. The dogs lunged, baying, and the men moved on. When silence returned, Henry Porter let out a breath and whispered, "The Lord provides." The circle grew bolder. They sharpened axes under the guise of chopping wood. They gathered cornmeal and bacon in hidden sacks. Women passed messages folded into cloth. Cherry, Nat's wife, pressed a knife into his hand one evening. "For when the hour comes," her voice trembled. "Promise me you'll return." Nat kissed her forehead. "If I do not, I'll meet you in the kingdom." On a Sunday night, beneath the cover of prayer, they swore their oath. Each man laid his hand upon a Bible worn thin by Nat's fingers. Nat's voice shook with both fire and sorrow. "We strike not as thieves, but as soldiers of the Lord. Swear it." One by one, they swore. The candle guttered, the flame shrinking low, but their resolve burned brighter. The rebellion was no longer a dream. It was alive, breathing, waiting for the hour. The night of August 21st, 1831 fell heavy with heat. Cicadas screamed in the trees. The moon hung pale, veiled by thin clouds as if ashamed to watch. In a cabin at the edge of the Travis plantation, Nat Turner stood with his circle. Their faces were grave, each man armed with nothing but axes, hatchets, and resolve. Nat whispered, "It begins." Hark adjusted the grip on his axe. "Once we start, there's no going back." Henry Porter gave a sharp laugh, too loud in the silence. "We crossed that line long ago." Nat pushed open the door. The night air smelled of damp hay and iron. They moved like shadows toward the Travis house, the very place Nat had been enslaved, the home of Joseph Travis. The house loomed pale against the dark, windows like blind eyes. A dog barked, then whimpered, retreating into silence. Inside, the family slept. Nat's hand tightened on his axe. For a heartbeat, he hesitated, seeing not just a house, but years of labor, humiliation, stolen breath. Then he raised his hand. "Now!" Hark kicked the door in. The crash shattered the night. Screams erupted. The sound of women startled awake. Joseph Travis stumbled into the hall in his nightshirt. Henry struck first, his hatchet cleaving the man's skull before he could speak. Blood sprayed across the wall, black in the candlelight. Mrs. Travis shrieked, clutching her children. Nat stepped forward, his face unreadable. He whispered, "The sins of the father fall upon the house." Pharaoh lunged, blade flashing. The screams ended. The silence after was suffocating. For a long moment, the men stood in the carnage, chests heaving. Nat closed his eyes. "It has begun. The Lord walks with us." They moved quickly from house to house. At the Reese home, an overseer reached for his musket. Hark was faster. His axe dropped the man before the gun fired. At the Newsom place, a young girl clutched her doll, eyes wide with terror. Austin froze. His hands shook. Nat's voice cut sharp. No hesitation. "This is war." Henry grabbed Austin's arm. "Do it or we're all undone." Austin wept as he swung. The doll dropped into the blood. Words spread in whispers before dawn. Some enslaved joined eagerly, their faces lit with fury. Others shrank back, whispering prayers, too afraid to raise a hand. But the tide grew. By morning, they were more than 30 strong, marching from farm to farm. Nat walked at the front, robe stained, eyes burning with a strange calm. He quoted scripture with every strike, his voice rising over the chaos. "Slay utterly old and young, saith the Lord." The sound of it carried, mingling with screams, the thud of axes, the crack of broken doors. At one plantation, a slave woman named Fanny fell to her knees before Nat. "Spare my mistress. She has been kind." Nat's gaze turned to stone. There is no kindness in chains. The blade fell. The rebellion spread like wildfire through Southampton. Houses burned. White families fled into the woods, bleeding, crying, pursued by the echo of hymns twisted into war cries. But not all was triumph. At the Parker farm, men fought back. Shots rang out. Pharaoh staggered, blood blooming across his chest. He gasped, clutching Nat's arm. "Don't let it end with me." Nat pressed him down gently. "You will be remembered." Pharaoh died with his eyes open to the dawn. The rising sun turned the fields red, and still the rebels pressed on. They had killed nearly 60 souls, their path marked by smoke and silence. By midday, Nat's army was near 100 strong. He looked upon them and saw faces fierce with vengeance, others pale with dread. Hark muttered, "We're loud now, too loud. They'll gather against us." Henry spat in the dirt, then let them come. Let the land drown in blood. Nat lifted his hand, the scripture still burning on his lips. "We march until the Lord says stop." And so they marched, deeper into the heart of Southampton, the drums of vengeance beating in their chests, the smell of blood thick in the summer heat. The rebellion had begun, and the world could never again pretend not to hear the cry for freedom. By the second dawn, the world had shifted. Smoke clung low across the fields, heavy with the stench of iron and ash. Houses lay in ruins, the silence broken only by the cries of orphans and the shuffle of rebels too weary to lift their weapons. Nat stood among them, his robes stiff with dried blood, eyes sunken from sleeplessness. Henry Porter broke the silence. "We've carved our mark, but they'll be coming now." "They already are," Hark muttered, pointing toward the tree line. Dust rose in the distance. Horsemen, dozens of them, their muskets glinting in the morning sun. The Virginia militia. A wave of dread rippled through the ranks. Nat raised his hand. "Hold fast. The Lord will fight for us," but the men shifted nervously. Some clutched their axes tighter. Others glanced toward the woods, already thinking of escape. The militia rode hard into the field, drums pounding, hooves thundering like judgment itself. A voice boomed from their front. "Lay down your arms and you may yet live." Henry spat. "Better to die free than crawl back in chains." The first volley of musket fire cracked through the air. 2 rebels fell instantly, blood sprang into the dirt. Panic erupted. "Scatter!" Austin cried, but his words were drowned by the roar of gunfire. Hark charged forward with a roar, swinging his axe into a soldier's chest before a bayonet pierced his side. He fell to his knees, coughing blood. "Hark!" Nat screamed, but his friend slumped lifeless to the earth. The rebels faltered. Some fought desperately, but most turned and fled into the woods. The militia pressed their advantage, cutting them down like wheat before the scythe. Henry grabbed Nat's arm. "We must fall back, regroup."
Nat's eyes burned with fury.
"No, we press on. The vision is not yet complete." But Henry shook his head, despair in his voice. "Look around you, preacher. The vision is dying." Shots rang again. Austin was struck in the leg, tumbling into the grass. Soldiers descended on him. He swung wildly with his hatchet until a bayonet silenced him. The ground seemed to drink the blood of the rebels. Nat stumbled back into the woods, heart pounding, his band dwindling with every step. From nearly 100, fewer than 20 followed him now. They crouched in the shadows, panting, the sound of hunting dogs already drifting closer. Fanny, the woman who had begged earlier, appeared trembling from the brush. "They're promising mercy to those who confess." "I heard them." "If we stay with you, we're dead." Henry rounded on her, fury in his eyes. "You'd betray us? After everything?" Tears streamed down her face. "I just want to live." Nat's voice cut cold. "There is no mercy in their chains. Choose your master." But one by one, more rebels slipped away, vanishing into the woods, surrendering themselves to the approaching soldiers. Henry clenched his fists. Cowards, every one of them. The dogs' barks grew louder. Nat led the remaining few deeper into the swamps, wading through mud and reeds, the air thick with mosquitoes and fear. For days they hid, striking out in small raids, stealing food, whispering prayers by firelight. But their numbers dwindled with each skirmish. Finally, Henry confronted Nat beneath the cover of night. "This is folly. We're hunted animals now. Better we scatter and save ourselves." Nat's face hardened. "I will not scatter. I saw the vision. The sun darkened, the heavens falling. This was meant." Henry's voice broke. "And what if you saw wrong?" Silence stretched between them, heavy as chains. At dawn, Henry was gone. Whether killed, captured, or fled, Nat never learned. Alone now, Nat Turner drifted through the swamps like a ghost. The rebellion lay crushed, its bodies buried in shallow graves, its name already cursed across Virginia. But still he clung to his vision, waiting for the sign that his time was not yet finished. The dogs hunted closer. The preacher had become the fugitive. The rebellion ended in smoke and silence. The fields of Southampton were stained dark, the cries of the dead swallowed by the buzzing of flies. But the violence was not finished. Reprisal came swift and merciless. Militias and armed mobs swept across the countryside, dragging the enslaved from cabins, fields, and hiding places. Justice was no longer blind. It was blind with rage. In a tavern converted into a makeshift courtroom, the first trials began. The room smelled of sweat, tobacco, and gunpowder. A judge pounded the table. "Bring in the prisoners." They shuffled forward, wrists bound with coarse rope. Austin's younger brother, Samuel, barely 18, limped from a musket wound. His face was swollen, but his voice was steady. "You call this justice?" He spat. "We fought for freedom." The judge glared down. "You fought for slaughter. The gallows will answer you." Gasps rippled through the room. Some white farmers nodded grimly. Others whispered, uneasy at the spectacle of boys dragged to their deaths. Henry Porter, captured days later, stood tall when his turn came. His clothes were ragged, but his voice carried. "You can hang me, but my blood will cry louder than your bells. We broke your peace because it was built on chains." The prosecutor sneered. "Peace will be restored with rope and fire." And so it was. One by one, men were hanged in the courthouse yard. The creak of wood and the snap of rope echoed across the town square. Crowds gathered, some to cheer, some to tremble. Children were lifted onto shoulders to watch. Women covered their mouths. Slaves were forced to stand at the edge, eyes lowered, forbidden to speak. Henry's last words carried across the silence. "Tell the Lord I did not bow." The trapdoor fell. Not all waited for trial. In the woods, patrols hunted down any black man who looked suspicious. Some were killed on sight, their bodies left dangling from trees as warnings. A witness whispered to his wife, "They're killing men who had nothing to do with Turner. Innocents, all of them." She hushed him quickly. To speak mercy was dangerous. Fear spread faster than fire. White families barred doors at night, clutching pistols. Enslaved families huddled in silence, afraid their whispers might be overheard. And still Nat Turner was nowhere to be found. For weeks he slipped through the swamps, moving by night, drinking from streams, living on roots and stolen corn. Farmers swore they saw his shadow in the trees. Mothers hushed children with his name. He became more myth than man. At last, in October, a hunter spotted movement beneath tangled vines. "There," he whispered to his companion. The dogs lunged. Nat was dragged from a pit, filthy, starving, his once bright eyes dulled but not broken. When the soldiers shoved him into town, whispers spread like wildfire. "The prophet is caught." At his trial, the air was thick with expectation. The judge leaned forward. "Nat Turner, do you confess?" Nat's voice was low, calm. "I do not deny what I've done." "Why?" the judge demanded. Nat lifted his head slowly, eyes burning once more. "Because the Spirit spoke to me. Because the land cried for blood. Because freedom was worth more than breath." The courtroom fell silent. One farmer muttered, "Madman." Another whispered, "Or a prophet." The judge slammed his gavel. "This court condemns you to death by hanging. May God have mercy on your soul." Nat smiled faintly. "He already has." The day of his execution was bitter cold. The gallows stood tall in Jerusalem, Virginia, its wood dark against the pale sky. A crowd gathered, restless. Some jeered, some crossed themselves. Soldiers kept their muskets ready. Nat climbed the steps slowly, each footfall steady. His hands were bound, but his back was straight. A minister stepped forward. "Do you have last words?" Nat gazed across the sea of faces. Was not Christ crucified? "If you would kill me for rising against bondage, then so be it. I die a free man." The rope was placed around his neck. The crowd held its breath. The trapdoor fell. His body swung motionless, but his name did not die. Across Virginia, the rebellion left scars. Over 50 white souls had been killed, and in retaliation nearly 200 black men, women, and children had been slaughtered, many with no link to Nat at all. Planters tightened their grip. New laws were passed. Slaves were forbidden to gather, forbidden to read, forbidden to preach. The walls of bondage grew higher, and yet in the hush of slave cabins, whispers spread of Nat Turner's vision, of chains broken, of fire in the fields, of a preacher who dared to strike back. One old woman rocked her child to sleep, humming a lullaby under her breath. Between the lines of melody, she whispered, "They killed him, but his spirit walks." After the hangings, after the smoke, after the dogs had gone silent, Southampton tried to return to normal. But nothing was the same. Every shadow looked dangerous. Every prayer whispered in the cabins seemed a conspiracy. The planters built taller fences, passed harsher laws, and swore the rebellion was finished. Yet in the hush of night, the story of Nat Turner grew wings. Among the enslaved, his name became a secret flame. An old man sharpening his hoe murmured to a boy. I saw him once, the eyes like fire, voice like thunder. He swung his axe and the earth shook. The boy whispered back, was he real? As real as these chains, the old man said, tapping the iron at his ankles. In another cabin, a mother traced patterns in the dirt for her daughter. Remember this name, Nat Turner. They say he walked with angels. Her daughter frowned. But he lost. The mother's voice hardened. No, child. He showed us we could fight. Even if we fall, the earth remembers the blood. On the other side of the divide, whites spoke of him with dread. A tavern in Richmond buzzed with fear. A planter slammed his mug on the table. Mark my words, another Turner will rise. If we don't crush the spark now, the fire will spread. A politician leaned close, voice hushed. That's why we'll make the laws tighter. No more slave preachers, no more meetings after dark. Silence is safety, but silence never lasts. Newspapers spread the tale. Some called Turner a butcher, a fanatic, a devil in human flesh. Others, more carefully, called him a prophet. One editor wrote, he saw visions in the sky, and though the gallows claimed his body, his spirit will not rest. Years passed. The rebellion faded into the history books, but it never truly disappeared. Frederick Douglass, speaking decades later, invoked Turner's name with both awe and warning. Nat Turner reminded this nation that men will not wear chains forever. The lash creates its own vengeance. Children born long after the rebellion grew up with ghost stories of the preacher in the woods, eyes glowing, axe dripping, waiting for Judgment Day. Slave patrols whispered that his ghost stalked them on moonless nights. They swore they heard hymns in the trees, the kind Turner once chanted before he struck. Even free black communities carried the legend. In northern cities, abolitionists invoked his name in speeches, half proud, half fearful. A woman in Philadelphia stood before a crowd. Do not call him savage. Call him what he was, a man who could no longer kneel. But others cautioned silence, fearing his name would bring fresh terror upon those still bound in chains. And so Nat Turner lived two lives in memory, one of blood and dread among the powerful, one of fire and hope among the oppressed. He became less a man than a symbol, his axe cutting through the years, a lullaby carried through generations. Hush, child, don't you cry. Nat Turner's spirit's passing by. Chains may bind, the lash may sting, but freedom walks where prophets sing. In the hush of fields at dusk, workers sang it softly, hiding the words beneath the rhythm of labor. Overseers heard only the hum of voices, but in the children's ears the name Nat Turner lived on. The rebellion is over, the gallows silent, the blood washed into the earth. But the question lingers, heavier than chains, what does it mean? Nat Turner's revolt was not the first act of resistance, nor would it be the last. Countless others resisted quietly, by breaking tools, feigning sickness, teaching letters in secret, or simply surviving when survival itself was defiance. But Turner's strike was different. It was fire made flesh, a cry that could not be ignored. The world called him a murderer. The enslaved called him a prophet. Perhaps he was both. Perhaps the line between villain and savior is thinner than history admits. What cannot be denied is this: the rebellion shattered illusions. It proved that bondage did not make people docile. It proved that beneath every bowed head there might be a blade waiting for its moment. And yet the rebellion also left scars. Innocents died. Reprisals fell on hundreds who had not raised a hand. Oppression grew harsher, chains heavier, laws more cruel. The cost of resistance was written in blood. So what do we take from it? That justice is never clean. That freedom demands sacrifice. That history remembers those who dared to strike even when their strike failed. Nat Turner's voice is gone, but his question remains. Nearly 2 centuries later, the story of Nat Turner still unsettles. It cannot be filed neatly into good and evil, victim and villain. It is a story of blood and belief, of a man who saw visions in the sky and chose to act, no matter the cost. So we are left with the question he forces upon us. If you lived in chains, If your children were born into bondage, if your prayers went unheard, and what would you do? Would you wait for mercy? Would you bow your head? Or would you pick up the axe, knowing the gallows waited at the end? History does not give easy answers, but it does demand that we ask the hardest questions of ourselves. If this story gripped you, if you believe the past must be remembered in its darkest shades, subscribe, share, and keep the fire of history alive, because the past is not gone, it walks beside us. This is the slave resistance, where the voices of the chained rise again.